house rules. Join us on AVE Live, Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Join us on Zoom. Watch on Facebook or YouTube from the AV Educate page, or register as an attendee for the webinar. Live Q&A. Our guest will lead us through a guided demo and conversation about tonight's topic. We will take your questions and comments throughout the show. Don't wait until the end. Get your questions and comments in early to shape the conversation. We don't know it all. We're human and don't claim to know everything. We may demonstrate or discuss one way to do something, but that doesn't mean it's the only way to do it. If you found another way that is easier or yields better results, please share with the community so we can all learn together. Follow AV Educate. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and have a library of content on YouTube. Join us on Zoom for AV Tech Talks and to become a member of our community on Discord, where the conversations, the learning, and the sharing continues. We are where you are. Place your phone over the QR code to come learn more about AV Educate.
Hey, welcome back to AV Tech Talks. How's everybody doing tonight? We're excited to be here. We are going to be talking about NDI. I'm sure most of our audience already knows about NDI. They've been using NDI. If you haven't, you're going to learn a whole lot. And we're fortunate enough, Omar managed to get us time with Roberto Musso, who is the director of NDI Product Management, if I got that right.
I'm the product manager for NDI. Much simple.
Great. Perfect. And he's gonna give us a little bit of a little presentation, and then we're gonna take your questions like we always do. Just quick before we start from the panel, who is using NDI in their projects currently? So I see Leo's hand. I see Omar. Marty. Oh, Jeff, you've used it once or twice? Is that accurate? One or two times? Jeff is always joining us from some mode of transportation or about to get into some mode of transportation. So he's at the airport today. But so hopefully we'll get to hear a little from him. If not, though, we understand. Thanks, Jeff, for being here. But
Glad
Leo, how are you using NDI?
So we're using NDI for some of our cameras in locations where we want to have multiple PTZ cameras. We're also using NDI to bring in, I bring in effects from other machines in lower thirds and things like that via NDI.
Oh, that's great. What cameras are you using, like bird dogs or something, or?
Both bird dogs and PTZ optics cameras. We're using NDI on both of those, and we're really interested in looking at using NDI on the other way out. So we push it out to remote monitors to save having to run SDI out to multiple things where we want to send the same picture many times.
Cool. And then I think Marty, you had your hand up. How are you using NDI?
Well, right now I'm using it to send signals between computers on the same network, but we will be using it for camera feeds to switchers at installations, and also looking at using it for distribution around the facility to monitors in lobbies and classrooms and other places. So all the
That's
way
great.
around, the 360-degree NDI.
Nice, nice. And then Omar, I know you do some pretty big shows where NDI is like crucial to the workflow.
Yeah. So majority of my stuff that I do is vMix and NDI, kind of ingesting a bunch of Zoom callers. We've done a couple of the big like Grant Cardone and Tony Robinson things where we're doing the Zoom walls. We've done that with NDI. The PC farms, we call them. We've done that as well. And then on the other side of that as well for installation, I've done a lot of stuff with Bird Dog and PTC Optics, installing that and using NDI to run PoE++ and an NDI to run power and signal back to myself. So I've been using it a lot the last year right now, and I'm super excited to have this show tonight. So
awesome. So we're even using NDI tonight for this show. So one of the things I do is I capture a couple of the Zoom windows where I have the gallery, and then I have the speaker view, so I can cut between them. That's on two different machines, like you just saw. And then I actually send the program feed from vMix NDI back to the webinar so that the panelists can see what's on screen, as well as the people joining us on the Zoom webinar. So it's very useful. And because our Zoom webinars are in 1080p, thanks to the DVE store, we're sending high res video over my network here. It's all going 1080 everywhere that I'm sending it. So it's very useful for getting things in and out of various machines. So really cool. So with that, I want to introduce Roberto, and I'd love to see what you have for us.
I'm very pleased to be here with you. So a few words about my background. I've been starting in the broadcast market many years ago. And I remember my first hard drive was a 10 megabyte. And so, it was huge. And so today, what we can do with NDI is just unbelievable. And this is something really, we will see a great future with NDI. So just to say a few words about NDI, let me share my screen. I have a very short presentation. So what is NDI? The idea was really to move video and audio across a network, wireless, mobile, or desktop machine, or whatever, just using a basic IP infrastructure, and we did that. We started developing, the first NDI release was a few years ago. The idea was really to use an existing network infrastructure instead of SDI. And, what NDI make possible is to create a very flexible workflow. Today, in the last year, we've been focused to make NDI working, for example, in cloud environment, in a virtual environment, because we had this kind of huge demand from our customer, moving some production outside their building. And in the last year, we really figured out that, NDI is the perfect solution to make live production remote live production, and something completely not conventional. And then the other very interesting aspect in NDI is that allowed many people to cooperate to create more content, even across internet. And this is where we are focused on, to make NDI working everywhere. And the other point is that the other focus about NDI was to make something very easy to use. And because, of course, we are coming from a long history of video production where nothing is really easy. And this was the other goal, you know, to make something easy to set up, reliable, and that's it. So what we can do today and how NDI works, I mean, is audio and video over IP, and there are many aspects in NDI that make NDI very easy. For example, the discovery and registration of NDI is simple. As I said before, it works in a very basic network infrastructure. And NDI support many different things. I mean, it's not only video, it's audio, it's video with alpha channel, it's metadata, it's remote control. And more we are adding features that are, you know, are making NDI quite unique. There are many examples of features that already today are quite impressive. For example, compared to other solutions, you know, it looks so obvious that we support alpha channel. But if you think about the reality of the market, there are not so many video over IP solutions supporting embedded alpha channel. For example, in SMPTE 2110, you need 2 different streams. In NDI, alpha channel is embedded in the mainstream. There is another aspect that is absolutely relevant, is the fact that, and this is only one of the advantages to have to use compression. For example, today we can save an NDI stream into a file without using any CPU because the stream is already compressed. So we just save it. And there are software applications that are able to play or edit. For example, today we can edit with Adobe Premiere an NDI growing file. And this is opening a very interesting scenario because just imagine that you can have a multiple stream in your network that are saved in several NDI growing file, and then you can have several users using an editing suite to edit growing file. The other big focus we are having is about audio, because during this last year, we realized that there are not so many technologies that work for audio, for example, in the cloud. And this is another very interesting aspect about NDI and synchronization. You know, NDI can work completely without any synchronization. And this for audio is something unique, because where is not possible to have hardware to make synchronization for audio, then NDI is crucial, because NDI can work without it. And I mean, in terms of presentation, that's it. Maybe question and answer is the next step.
No, that's great. Absolutely, I think that was a great overview. I see that on our panel, Andrew Broughton, you have a question.
Yeah, I wonder if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about the difference between NDI and some of the other streaming systems, like you mentioned SMPTE 2110, and what about AVB? I don't know if that's a similar sort of concept or not.
Yeah, AVB is something for audio. Is an audio therapy.
Oh, AVB. It's called audio video bridging. It doesn't do video. I thought it did. Maybe
AVB, not. AWB or AVB?
AVB, audio video bridging.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with this, so okay. I can talk about for sure. 2110 is something that I know quite well. I mean, I can talk about the difference with SRT, for example, and SVDOE. So in 2110, there are big difference. So the main difference is that NDI is compressed. where 2110 is uncompressed. The other thing about 2110 is that, you know, the idea was to have was to be able to use any single stream without having all the stream interleaved in a single stream. So for example, if I want to use only one audio channel in 2110, I can do it because, you know, audio, video, metadata are separated stream. And but then there is a side effect of this because 2110 require a synchronization method like P2P. And in NDI is completely different because NDI is compressed and all the stream are interleaved in all the essence, let's say, are interleaved in a single stream. But we can do something very similar to 2110 because now software application can, let's say, ask to the encoder to send out only video or only audio. And so the workflow at some point is quite similar to SMPTE 2110. But the other main difference is that we don't need the synchronization. We can use synchronization, of course, but we don't need it. For example, a difference between NDI and, for example, SRT. SRT is using higher compression. Do not use, there are no capability like alpha channel support. And is using a different transport. So the latency is higher compared to NDI. But, you know, the other, I would say that the other big point, if we compare SRT to NDI, is really what we can do with the technology, because we own the technology and we can decide to add feature. And it's a bit different, you know, dealing with the open source solution, you know. SVDOE is another technology, video and audio over IP, is uncompressed. So it's more similar to 2110. But I would say that the big advantage in NDI is that compared to 2110 and SVDOE is that we use a standard network infrastructure, which is not exactly the same with 2110 and SVDOE.
Okay. So in terms of control, you said you can also put control over the within that stream. Could that be TCP? Could that be any kind of control protocol we want to put through there?
So we use metadata. So what we do on the control side, we add the metadata in the NDI stream. So, for example, we can control PTZ camera using those metadata. But there is another big advantage. For example, we don't have any kind of limitation adding metadata in the NDI stream. So, for example, we can add, we are doing a lot of testing adding information for titling. So we can send an NDI stream with all the data inside, and on the other side, on the receiver side, we can have a graphic engine that is rendering a titling, reading the data in the NDI stream.
So which is there a lot of software that supports NDI directly and can translate this stream, or how does that work?
Well, there are software applications that are able to add metadata. We don't have today many third-party developers that are doing that. Okay. But, you know, Jeff is doing it.
And video like this, the NDI video can be brought into certain applications already, or?
Of course. I mean, there are two different software developer kit. Yeah, Jeff?
I was going to say the Sienna processing engine is one of those that does support that, Andy. That allows you to use that metadata. We use it to feed the tally information and also the names of the sources in our multi-viewers, which it's so slick. It's whenever you can just send a stream to it, and then you don't have to go through and relabel everything. If you reconnect a different stream, it updates and populates your multi-viewer right away.
That's very cool. And I assume the ports that are required to be open on each end if you're going across the internet are documented on your site?
Yeah.
It's UDP and TCP, I think.
Yeah, we can use UDP, both. We can use UDP, TCP, and multi-TCP. We have 3 different transmission protocol that we use.
Okay. Very interesting.
Yeah, and of course, on the internet, if you have enough bandwidth, you can use NDI on internet, and then you need to use mainly UDP.
If I was just using, let's say, just using one audio or a small audio stream and a small video stream, is the amount of bandwidth is based on how much video content there is and how much audio content, right? It's not
right.
Fixed. Yeah. Okay. So if I have a low res video thing, but 2 or 4 channels of audio, it's going to be much less than the normal HD streams and things like this, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. I need to look into this.
Yeah, there was a question from Marty, I think.
Yeah, hi. So this is all very interesting. And what I'd like to know more about is, you said that it doesn't require any synchronization. How particular is NDI about the hardware that it goes through, the kinds of switches? Are there any particular protocols that hardware needs to support, like precision time protocol, for example?
No, absolutely not. I mean, for us, the approach on, the synchronization approach, we are really pragmatic, basically is an IP stream. So if you have a switcher, when you switch from one source to another one, we will switch on the next frame. And so we really don't need any synchronization. Then, of course, if you have hardware in your machine, on the encoder side, on the mixer side that support synchronization, you will use synchronization. But, we don't need that.
And what about graphics cards?
In terms of input, video input, or graphic like GPU?
GPUs, because I like, for instance, I have one desktop where NDI works great. I have another desktop where I can receive NDI, but I can't generate any NDI.
That's interesting. I think probably is something related to the driver or the version. We should see. I mean, I don't know how to answer. I should take a look of the system. Yeah, Omar.
So I just want to jump in real quick. I've experienced a similar situation like that, and the solution that I found was that, let's say I'm doing like a screen capture and AI input, the actual app itself had some reason crashed or one or the other, and Windows itself is still running it in the programs, and I've had to go on the task manager, physically kill that task, whatever it's doing in the background, to then reopen it and relaunch it, and that's solved most of the times when that's happened to me. Today, for example, it happened to us. We were doing a screen capture, PC for Zoom screen capture plus webcam input, and for whatever reason, after one of the sessions, the screen capture just turned off. The app physically went away, and I couldn't relaunch it. I had to go to the task manager, physically end task to kill it, and then come back up. My assumption is that it was a Windows kind of thing in the background that was causing that, not an NDI problem. But that's my workaround to make that when it disappears and it doesn't give me controls. That's been what I found is that for some reason, Windows in the background is still running it, even though the icon isn't there anymore. That's been my workaround for that solution. And that's just trial and error between me and Jeff. Leo, you had your hand up for a while, man. Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. It's fine. It's been really interesting, this, Roberto. Thank you. Just following up on some of the questions from that Andrew asked. You talked about NDI in the cloud, and you said about how it's related to other protocols, and you talked about SRT. There's just two others I wanted to get a quick understanding. Could you see NDI being used instead of something like WebRTC? And then on a local environment, where would you see it when you were talking about audio? Would you see it against something like Dante?
I don't think it will be. I mean, NDI is completely different than WebRTC. I don't think. No, I don't think it's something that we can, I don't find the word in English. So anyway, we compare. I don't think we can compare NDI with WebRTC. It's completely different. Regarding Dante, so there is. I would say that, in my opinion, there is no reason not to use or to prefer NDI instead of Dante in a local environment. Because especially because Dante have a lot of audio equipment available. So NDI is a solution where, for example, Dante cannot work. For example, if you have several machines in the cloud and you need to create a mix minus, probably NDI is the easiest solution, because NDI support a lot of audio channel. Any NDI stream can support a lot of audio channel, and we are working to make NDI audio a real solution in the near future.
Just coming back on that really quickly, when you're talking about using NDI, and you talked about that the control can be sent over NDI. I've typically seen NDI as a one-way protocol.
Yeah.
Is it two-way, or is it one-way, or is it just my knowledge?
It's bidirectional. At least the metadata are bidirectional. So, and a good example is the PTZ control. So you receive the video from a PTZ camera, but you are able to send to the PTZ camera the control and the tally information. So this is, and another example is the virtual KVM in the scan converter.
So do you think you'd also, for audio, be able to have a surface and be able to control a remote desk via NDI?
Why not? This is something absolutely possible. I don't think we have a plan for this yet, because there are other solutions. So you can use. It's not that difficult to make MIDI, for example, running over internet. So, but it's a good idea. I mean, because we support as many, any kind of metadata, and it's bidirectional. Why not? I think it's a good idea.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
So is there any software that could convert, say, Dante to NDI?
Well, I saw some software on the web, but if you use a NewTek product like the NC1IO module or the NewTek Connect Pro, you can use those applications to transcode. I mean, to use both NDI and Dante. So, for example, you can embed or de-embed from to NDI and Dante. Sienna is another good example.
I'm thinking more in software. Like if you had loopback or something, does NDI support an ASI or core audio drivers or ASIO drivers?
This is something that is coming quite soon.
Okay. Because if there were drivers, then you could just use loopback to connect the two together. And
I cannot spoil some announcement. So, but we will have NDI audio working in audio application.
I'm interested.
Yeah,
Iris,
very
you had
cool.
something?
Yeah, I was going to ask a question in a completely different direction. You mentioned that when it goes into Premiere Pro, it is already compressed. So when it shows up in Premiere Pro, is it one file or can you split the audio and video to edit? Or are you stuck with what you got?
No, you can do everything one. So you can see when you load an NDI file in Adobe Premiere, you see the video track and the audio track. You can do everything one.
I have one more question that's on this area, and I get asked this quite a lot of times, and I want to hear your view of your answer to this. Is the difference between why should people be using NDI on their local environment rather than using something like H.264 from their cameras?
Well, we have two different compression in NDI. We have, let's say, NDI high bandwidth and NDI HX. So NDI high bandwidth is iframe only, and it is high bit rate. To give you an idea, 1080-60p is around 150 megabit per second. And then we have NDI HX. So NDI HX is something that, like PTZ camera that are producing an H.264 stream. This is a way to have a compatible stream based on NDI. So basically, we use H.264 or HAVC inside an NDI transport. And so we have the different solution. And so, I mean, depend on the kind of production you want to do. For example, in a more broadcast-oriented production, customer want to have a lower latency and higher quality compared to H.264, and is where NDI high bandwidth is perfect.
So HX is H.264 in an NDI wrapper?
Right, right.
Wow,
It can be H.264 or HAVC, depending on the encoder.
And is the NDI wrapper, is that further encoding, or is the encoding all done within the H.264?
Yeah, encoder is done by, for example, in PTZ, the encoder is done by the camera.
So I guess that's why they include it, because it's really easy. They've built it already. They've just got to put the wrappers around the outside.
Right.
That's it.
And with NDI HX, amazingly, we support, for example, alpha channel. We support multi-channel audio. So I'm pretty sure that, I can see that third-party company will support, for example, alpha channel in NDI HX. Why not? A good example of metadata support in HX is if you download today the NDI tools, there's a version of screen capture that is screen capture HX. And so this is a software application that is creating a compressed stream, but then you can enable the virtual KVM. And so this is another example of the usage of metadata, even with a compressed NDI stream.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was just going to ask about the KVM control, because I think many users don't even realize the
Right.
ability of KVM through NDI. Could you maybe speak to that a little bit?
I'm a big
Yeah.
user of your KVM. It's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something. Yeah, is one of my preferred features because every time I need to remote a machine, for example, I own an NDI-based Obi-Wan, and so sometimes it is very interesting because when I do live production, for example, basketball or volleyball, I'm inside the arena, and I want to remote the mixer inside the Obi-Wan, and I can just do it with the KVM. So what I do, I used to run in all my computer the NDI screen capture, and I enabled the KVM. And then I can use a laptop anywhere in the network or another computer. And then at this point, with the NDI Studio Monitor, I receive the desktop of a remote computer, and then I can fully control the computer. And I can fully control something like TriCaster application, because even the TriCaster application offer the KVM support. So you can fully remote a TriCaster that is somewhere in the network.
You're talking about using this instead of something like TeamViewer. Is that?
Yeah, the difference is that, I would say NDI screen capture is lighter, is using less GPU, especially when you want to remote an application like a TriCaster. TeamViewer is using a lot of GPU resource, and I mean, it's much better to use the NDI screen capture.
Yeah, I actually have a use case. I have a couple of small little NUC type computers, and one of the things I'm trying to build with them is I just keep getting derailed because so many virtual events keep happening that take my attention away from that project. But the plan is to run them headless, and my preliminary tests, I was able to run them with emulators and have NDI screen capture on at startup, and then on another machine use NDI Studio Manager to be able to remote in, and then use them for example, for Zoom machines, just get into a Zoom meeting, pin who I need to pin using the KVM control, and then leave them alone. I've even put like Zoom OSC on them and then been able to change the pins, but getting the initial full screen, getting all the screen debris out of the way, that stuff, just doing that via KVM control from another computer on the network makes it really easy to make these small little lightweight machines not even have to be connected to a monitor.
Right. Yeah. Just take in account that because NDI screen capture is generating an NDI stream, then you can save it. And so if you want to do a screen capture and save what you're doing, this is a perfect solution, because then you have an NDI file.
Hey, Leo, I'm going to let you jump in there, and then I want to go to some of these questions that are coming in from YouTube and Facebook. So go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you, Omar. My quick question, and maybe it's a long answer, but it doesn't need to be. One of the questions I have is about security. I'm thinking about this when you're talking about education, and you're sort of saying, we're going to let people in the room be able to be an NDI source. How are we not going to get hijacked when literally every person in that education environment could be an NDI camera?
We have, when you install the NDI tools, there's an application that is the Access Manager. And so in the Access Manager, you can enable a privacy, a sort of privacy. So every user that are part of this group can share and receive the video. But then, the other thing is really on the networking side. I mean, just take in account that NDI is a pure networking, is really, so there are so many solutions in the networking to avoid, people, using the network in an improper way, that I think the best solution is really to have a proper network administration. One of the things that, we have many customers asking for encryption, but then, there is always a price to pay. If you add encryption, you add latency. And so we really prefer to have a correct approach to the network management instead of adding, for example, latency.
So if I could just jump in here, I got so many stories to relate about audio and daunting NDI on the same network and KVM uses for things like that. But one of the questions I got from the YouTube side was from a gentleman named Tom on YouTube. And his question is, resolutions continuing to increase. Will NDI be able to handle, let's say, 8K and beyond? Will that change from using a 1G infrastructure to something else?
Yeah, so we don't have any limitation in resolution or frame rate. And because it's pure networking, I mean, today is so easy to use a 10 gigabit network, but in the market already exists 400 gigabit network. So this is our approach, and this is why we believe that we are in the right direction, because 8K or 1000 frames per second is not a problem for NDI.
Yeah, great. So another question I have here from the community, this one is from Mike. He's asking, are there any downsides to combining NDI and NDI HX video sources in a live streaming production where the compression of HX video looks noticeably less good?
Well, I don't see, in my experience and in many customer experience, we don't, I mean, I cannot say that I don't see any issue doing that. For sure, the user need to take in account that probably NDI HX have a little bit more latency, even because, if you compare an SDI camera with the PTZ, the PTZ camera itself is probably adding some latency. And so, but, this, all the production tool more and more are designed to fix those kind of issues. For example, in a TriCaster, you can delay a video source, or you can delay any single audio source. And so at the end, you have all the tool to adjust, this kind of issue. In terms of quality, it's very difficult to see visible artifact in NDI. I mean, even in NDI HX.
Ed, you got some?
Yeah. So I'm not sure who this question came in from. I think it actually was Mark Hadley here on the Zoom side. NDI uses standard network infrastructure. In what way does SMPTE 2110 use a non-standard network infrastructure? So that was back when we were talking about those differences.
Well, first of all, if you think about Ultra HD, SMPTE 2110 is around 12 gigabit. But then all the infrastructure must be designed to support PTP. And then there are, the discovery and registration in 2110 is completely different require an extra application. So is, technically speaking, we can say that, a network switch that is designed for 2110 can be used for IT, but is absolutely not recommended to use a 2110 network infrastructure as an IT infrastructure, because everything must be used for, warranty the 2110 workflow. So I don't think anybody will add a printer in a 2110 environment, but this is possible in NDI.
Right. So the 2110 infrastructure is more customized and
Exactly.
Higher rate of configuration, where NDI, much like Dante, you can just drop it on a regular network. Got it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Great. I hope that clears that up. We had another question here from Mike Graham. Many users of Titler Live, including me, have had issues with bringing in titles into vMix from Titler Live on another computer via NDI. Often the text on the titles changes to 000 in NewBlue Titler Live after several minutes. We reported it to NewBlue, the developer. Any hunches on what might be driving the bug? Metadata release, maybe? Or related, maybe?
No, I don't think so. I think it's something in the application.
Got it. Okay. Nice, easy answer for that. All right, I lost my place with my questions. Where did it go? Is NDI KVM for PC only?
Oh, I think it's working on Mac too.
So that's interesting. I've had problems doing KVM on Mac, actually. As far as trying to control another computer via NDI KVM. So once I had problems, though, I had to move on quickly. It wasn't something I spent a lot of time trying to solve. But NDI definitely does operate a little bit differently with Mac, especially if you're using multiple desktops. Is that an accurate statement?
I think, I got an answer from, the control is only for Windows. It's not in,
Right. That's what
I'm not a Mac user, so I'm.
Gotcha. Okay. No problem.
I need to learn. Anyway.
So that last question was from James Hutchinson, who also asked, is parity of software features for PC and Mac OS planned? If so, is there a rough idea of when? So so some of those differences, like we were just talking about KVM control and any of the other things that function differently, are those just going to be what they are, that they are different between Mac and PC, or is there any plans to make those closer?
Well, the answer that I can say is that ideally we would like to have every platform supporting the same feature, but it's not that easy. Sometimes there are platform limitations, sometimes there are priority, that we need to define.
Got it. Okay, great. I think we're good for questions at the moment. So let's take it to the panel. I see Marty has his hands up. Marty, what do you got?
All right, something a little bit more fundamental. I'm finding that with a two desktop arrangement to generate an NDI stream that's a screen capture and then turn it into a webcam so I can pick it up on a different computer, just takes a lot of clicks, a lot of mouse clicks. Is there, and are there any plans to simplify the user interface?
So this is a good question. Look, there's the discovery and registration in NDI is quite easy. If you compare it with other solution. So what would be for you the better way? Basically, you generate an NDI stream from your desktop, and then you need to, in another machine, you need to find it and receive it. That's it. But if you think how it works, you don't need to know even the computer name or the IP address. So in my opinion, yeah, go ahead.
Finding it is easy. It's starting it. So like, for instance, you've got to go to your applications. You've got to open NDI tools. You've got to open up screen capture. Then you've got to open up webcam. Then you got to go to your little task manager in the taskbar, bring up the little tools, right click on webcam. That brings up a menu. You've got to click on, your video, click on your source. Then you've got to go back down and click on the webcam, do the same thing all over again. It's just a lot of clicks to set up each stream.
I see. I don't know. I think I will discuss about it.
Marty, I think we ought to get together and talk a little bit, because I think you're making more clicks than it needs to be.
Yeah, probably.
Well, I hope so.
Well, what I was going to say, Mark, is something that I've done. So the studio that I built has 10 Zoom machines. There's still some clicking involved, but I have them auto, since I use the same thing over and over again for Zoom, it's web input and desktop. They auto start off, and they, most of the time, I would say 98% of the time, NDI remembers my last setting, so they kind of just open up exactly where I left it at. Once in a while, because of I'm a vMix user primarily versus TriCaster right now, I'll have to go to like output 4 once in a while because I have like a DSN that I'm putting with a particular look. But most of the time, I'm always going out just to program an output 1. And my workaround for less clicks is that I have queued those 2 programs on NDI to just unlaunch to turn on. And majority of the time, they start off exactly where I left them off last time. So that's saved me a lot of the button clicks. And it's not very hard. In Windows, you just go to startup procedures and just add that to your queue. Literally just add it to the, press the plus button and it adds it to that queue of what starts up at the first thing of the Windows PCs that at least that we use. I assume other Windows are the same process. And Jeff, you might have a better answer than me, but that's the way we've done it on the PCs we have.
No, I agree completely. Even we had 150 machines running in the cloud last weekend, and every one of them started up and went straight to their input without any issues at all.
Yeah, so that brings up an interesting point, and I think Roberto, you mentioned discovery, and Jeff, in your cloud workflow, discovery servers are a crucial piece of that. Can you, Roberto, maybe talk about how NDI does discovery and what an NDI discovery server is? How do we set one up? Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
So we have 2 different solutions for discovery. The basic one is based on MDNS. So it's like when you want to discover a printer, when you want to print a document, you open your computer, you look for a printer, you find a printer, and that's it. This is MDNS. Basically, MDNS is sending information. Every NDI application is sending, or encoder or whatever is sending information over the network, and everybody can receive it. And everybody, when you open, for example, NDI Studio Monitor, and you look for a source, you see all the source in the network. But there are situations where MDNS cannot be used. For example, in a large network with tons of NDI source will become slow, or for example, network administration don't want to have MDNS running in the network, or you are in the cloud and it's quite difficult to create to make multicast working in the cloud. And so to make NDI discovery working, we have a discovery server, which is an application that is running in one machine. And this application is taking care to discover all the network source. So then when you set up in the Access Manager the discovery server, and as at this point, your application will look for the discovery server IP address, and at this point, will use the discovery server to discover the NDI source. This is quite efficient because it's a single machine that is, let's say, discovering all the NDI source in the network, and you know, on the receiver side, you just ask the information to this single machine. Discovery server can discover on multiple network, and this is quite interesting. So, and this is a very good way to use NDI over different subnet.
I think that's a crucial point to hammer home, that, you know, it is possible to use NDI over different subnets. You just have to. Yeah.
There are two different ways. One is to use discovery server. One is to use the remote source in Access Manager. So in Access Manager, you can add and define an IP address out of your subnet, and then you will be able to receive NDI stream from this remote IP address.
That's great. And then if you're using a discovery server, does that also take some of the bandwidth off of your network, because there's now something that's being directed and pointed and then telling the NDI where to go? Because I know that, you know, NDI kind of goes everywhere.
Right.
We don't have a way to segment it to a single NIC or anything like that on our computers. So does the discovery server help reduce some of our overall network traffic?
Yes, but this is something that will come soon. We will have a better solution quite soon.
I think we all love better, so that's great. Great to hear.
Yeah.
We have some other questions. Omar, do you want to grab the next one real quick?
Yeah, so I want to just jump in real quick, and then I want to apologize to Salvador Garcia. I apologize that I missed your question in the order of things. Anyways, I wanted to apologize to you publicly, so sorry about that. I missed your question. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. The question here is, how does NDI handle frame rates? Is it purely metadata? Programs like Reslim seem to be variable frame rates when outputting NDI.
I'm not sure I understood the question. I mean, frame rate, are we talking about the frame rate? Or, because I don't understand the logic.
That's right.
Yeah, metadata and frame rate, I mean, for me are two different stuff. So we handle frame. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I would love to hear you break it down. So let's break down frame rates in the one section and metadata in another one. Maybe the correlation here isn't exact, but his question was, how does NDI handle frame rates, and is it purely metadata? And then the example he was giving was a program that's called Reslim seems to be using variable frame rates when outputting NDI. And I know you guys have an SDK, so it's kind of like anybody can download NDI and use it to their abilities. But the main one, and again, let's separate the two questions. How does NDI handle frame rates is the first question. And the second question is it a purely metadata when it's handling frame rates?
The software application that is the application that is creating the NDI stream should be able to have a fixed frame rate. So if you work in 60 frames per second, you should be able to create 60 frames per second. So if there is a floating frame rate, there is something wrong in the application. That's it. And I would say that there is nothing to do with metadata. Metadata are, information that you add to an NDI stream to do something else. Is not related to frame rate.
Gotcha. And I'll ask Salvador to clarify his question a little bit more on the Facebook side. Another question that came up from the YouTube side that I thought was very, very excellent was from Tom. And I'll ask you the first, I'll explain the first part of this and then get to the question. So his first part is, thanks. I believe he said that 1080p 60 was about 150 megabytes. I'm wondering what the bit rate, megabit, I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm wondering what the bit rate might be for the high resolutions and the two different NDI compression schemes. His question leads into, is there a resource for that? In other words, matching resolution, frame rates, sample and color bit rates needed for the infrastructure. So in my mind, he's asking, is there a way or a resource that says, if I'm doing NDI at this resolution, at this refresh rate, or at this frame rate, at this color bit depth, what should I be sending out megabit rates? I'm sorry, did I say that right?
Yeah. So let's say that 1080 60i is up to 110 megabit per second in NDI high bandwidth, and is up to 130 megabit per second with alpha channel. If we go to Ultra HD, today is 230 megabit per second, and with alpha channel is 280 megabit per second. But then, of course, I mean, because NDI can be, those numbers are related to 8-bit, but NDI can be 16-bit. And so if the color depth is higher, the bandwidth will be higher. That's it. I mean, in NDI HX is completely different because, so in H.264, Ultra HD is around 30 megabit per second. In HAVC is 21 megabit per second. But this is a completely different kind of stream. I mean, it's more compressed than NDI high bandwidth.
And obviously, you're super knowledgeable in this. Is there a reference or a material that one of us who doesn't know the information top of our heads could look at? Like where does that translation between, if I'm doing 1080p at this resolution, it should be this much bandwidth or down the pipe? Where could I look at more stuff to learn about that and kind of have a little cheat sheet for myself to say, if I'm doing this, I should be doing this. If I'm doing this, I should be doing this.
Right. So we are working on a document, sort of technical brief or white paper, let's say. We will release it quite soon because it's a document where we explain all this kind of aspect, for example, networking or how to use multicast or information about data rate. That's it. Yep.
And that's awesome. And you guys do have some resources on your webpage. Are you able to talk about that? I know there's some stuff about some basic NDI or infrastructure things you should be aware of when using NDI in your system that's on your webpage.
Yeah, there are already some information, but we will have a much better document quite soon.
I love the cliffhangers of things that are coming.
There's another aspect that is important about bitrate. The data rate I mentioned is the maximum data rate in NDI, because NDI is not fixed bit rate, but is a variable bit rate. So it doesn't mean that if you have an NDI stream 1080p, this will be always 150 megabit per second. It can be much lower.
Great. And then I think last week we had someone talking about TriCaster, and one of the things that the TriCaster does is it dynamically uses the NDI and uses that variable bit rate, so that when you don't have something in preview or program, it's not pulling the full bandwidth.
Right. This is using a proxy resolution that is part of the NDI technology. And this is a very good way to optimize, with the TriCaster is a very good way to optimize the bandwidth. So all the source that are not used in an output are proxy.
And sorry, Leo, you had your hand up?
Yeah, taking this forward, you were talking about the difference in how you said HX is using 264 and things like that. One of the things I find with that is latency, and if you're going to be using full fat and HX, are you going to end up with two different latencies coming out of cameras? And,
of course,
because I think the HX the latency got dropped on it on version 4 or something. It got better. I noticed it got better, closer. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a HX version 2 that is offering much better latency and even quality. But not all the manufacturers support HX version 2. So this is, I would say that more and more manufacturers update their tool or application. More and more will be better.
But your latency, even though you're using H.264, is still faster than standard H.264.
Yeah,
I found.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like
absolutely, yes.
One is that's like 2 seconds, and you're under 500 milliseconds.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Great. I just thought it was me, and then I realized what you've done. So that's great.
Great. I'll take another question here from here in Zoom. Andrew Lipnick asks us, can you talk about the best practices with workflows that combine NDI and Dante infrastructures, specifically with regards to VLANs, muxing audio and video? Do tools such as the BirdDog NDI Dante bridge come into play?
So is a good practice to have two different networks if you want to use NDI and Dante, because I would say that sometimes the issue is related to network switch managing the traffic control, especially when you mix NDI and Dante, and so the recommendation is to use two different networks. You can use VLAN, or you can easily use two different network switch. Regarding application, the application made by BirdDog, is a very good tool, because allow to embed or de-embed NDI and with Dante. Of course, there are other applications like Sienna. So are utility that help to create a proper audio and video workflow. So
I just want to jump in there real quick and for that question you just asked. So I do it numerous times now, and this touches back on something you said earlier about NDI audio. I do 2 NICs on the same PC, one going out Dante using Dante's virtual sound card, and then NDI going out for video, Dante going out for that. I use Dante as my primary because it works with the most boards, so Yamaha CL5 is what I use in most setups. And that'll go out that way. I do a separate NIC on the same machine. That NIC goes into a Ubiquiti switcher, and that's Ubiquiti and Netgear are most of the ones that I recommend with the 10G ports or 10 gig ports. Those are VLANs, so they're separate from each other. We run Dante off one and NDI off the other one. I've had 0 problems. I max out because of some of the PCs about 10, only because we're running both of those same times on the PC side. Those so we do a out of the regular one for NDI, and then Dante out on a USB to adapter essentially for the Ethernet. Go to the same switch, VLAN one side for Dante, one side for video, we do Dante as our primary so that the audio guys control that individually. And then because we're doing vMix internally, we use the the NDI audio as a backup. So if anything were to happen to the audio engineer, or just for whatever reason the Dante just crashes or something like that, which has happened very rarely, but it does happen, I'm able to just go back there with the KVM, click on that machine, click on the audio settings, or click on NDI settings, turn on the audio settings, and then now my vMix machine becomes the primary for audio, and it's already been programmed in the vMix machine to take in on that bus. It is possible. It works very well. I highly recommend that setup only because it gives you a fallback. It helps you separate the two sources as well. And what I mean by fallback is you separate the two sources, so you have an audio and a video guy to take over those things. And if anything does happen to the audio, you have this fallback to go on NDI, which for me has worked very well. So that setup is totally doable. You can do it on two separate networks or do it on the same one and just VLAN one section of it. So ours is a 12 by 12, or we VLAN it for 12 and 12. So we have the extra 2 just in case. And our 10th machine out is actually our streaming machine to either another Zoom machine or to IBM or BeLive or whatever the platform might be for that scenario. And then that goes out hardline out of our machines. So that's totally plausible. And we use this KVM to control all those machines from one machine. So vMix is on one monitor essentially, and on the other monitor, I have the studio monitor opened up and I have everything on KVM. So I'm just able to jump in there and control each one individually. My question I wanted to ask you real quick, sorry, I've attended there. You guys came out with a new program for NDI, which I was really fascinated by because it helped, and Jeff Gizzi, we talked about this a lot, it helped kind of demystify some of the things. And it's called, and I got to look it up real quick because I said it wrong, NDI Analyzer for Windows. Can you kind of dive into that a little bit more and explain what that does and how people can use that to really help them troubleshoot their infrastructure, troubleshoot their network, find their sources, diagnose problems that they have by using the NDI Analyzer for the Windows side?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's still a command line tool. So you need to read the documentation. But is a great tool to analyze issues. For example, when you have a dropped frame or, this kind of problem is helping the user to debug, let's say, the network and to understand where the problem is coming from. I hope we will have a version soon with the user interface, or, I mean, we have tons of things to do. So as you can imagine, our R&D is super busy developing a lot of new stuff, and that's it. I hope that this tool will grow as the other tool part of NDI. Basically, I mean, I don't have so much to say about the tool because it's so easy. I mean, if you read the documentation, it's quite easy to use and is helping you to define where, for example, why some source is not working well, because it's showing you the latency of the network, the packet lost, this kind of information.
Yeah, I get that. One of the things that I noticed when I ran it for the first time is I was having an issue with 2 of the machines. Randomly during shows, stuff was going on, and what we determined was it wasn't essentially an NDI issue. It was more of a vMix/operator error. I had out of habit been enabling my buses on vMix.
Oh, I see.
And vMix was creating NDI sources, so my network was essentially spec'd out for a certain amount of NDI sources. And because the NDI was enabled on sources that weren't being used, but just because we left them on, there were additional NDI sources on the network that were being eating up our bandwidth essentially. And it was causing us to have 1 to 2 machines always be off because it was at the limit of what we were doing. So once we turned off the 4 settings that we weren't using within vMix itself, everything went away. And if it wasn't for that analyzer, I would have never figured it out because I just been running like that for so long. It became second nature to do it that way. Without the analyzer, I wasn't able to see that, hey, there's all these extra lines here. What are these? And it, pinpointed it. This is for this. This is for this. This is doing this. And I was like, okay, well, this one is over here in vMix. We don't ever use this. So let's turn that off. Let's turn this one off. And as soon as we eliminated those 4 NDI sources from the vMix side, that was turning on extra NDI sources. it solved all our problems. And if it wasn't for, again, if it wasn't for the analyzer, I wouldn't have caught it, because it's something I do with my personal machine and work machines that I do on default, because it's like when I want to have it available, I want to be able to just click on it and not have to restart or anything like that. And the analyzer really helped me figure it out. And honestly, like you said, it's a command prompt, but it's as soon as you open up, it tells you like, here's some settings for you to do. Here's how to do some of these things. Put that in there, and it populates the information for you. It's very, very straightforward.
Yeah.
I did call Chris for a second to figure out a couple things, because I wasn't 100% sure, but it was pretty straightforward for the most part.
There's a very important aspect when people use NDI. Everybody need to take in account that NDI is unicast. You can enable multicast, but it's unicast. And so the problem is, if you start, if you have a PTZ camera and then you start to receive the NDI output from the camera on one computer, then another one, then another one. So at some point, you reach the limit of the unicast. In a small environment, is not that difficult to understand and to manage. But sometime when you have hundreds of source and you are running complex video production, you can have issues, because you don't understand that you do not figure out that a source or a sender is saturated by many receiver using the stream. So when you design your workflow, you need to take in account this, that you're using unicast, or you turn your system in multicast, which is absolutely possible. It's quite easy, but is a decision that has to be made.
Go ahead, Leo.
Yeah, I've got a couple of quick follow-up questions on something. Marty was asking earlier about the performance on a PC and how you use it. Are you using the NVIDIA decodes and encodes, or is that something that the system uses when you're running on a PC or a Mac?
Not really. I mean, not really. For example, if you think about the NC1IO module made by NewTek, don't have any GPU. And so, no, GPU is not really needed for software encoding or decoding.
So that actually helps us, some of us who, if you're using something like vMix and you're already heavily dependent on how many encodes you can do on, because it's using the NVIDIA chipset. So then by knowing that you're then going into the processor, you're sort of separating the power of the machine up a bit.
Yeah. I mean, I think application like vMix or TriCaster are using the NVIDIA GPU to do other stuff than, encoding or decoding NDI stream. But then there is another aspect that is very important. A software application like vMix or TriCaster receive an NDI stream that is already compressed. Then is how the question is if the application is able to manage the NDI stream without decompressing. So it's quite technical, but there are applications that are more efficient using NDI. And so some applications can do much more with NDI than others.
Would you know if, for example, with the M1 chipset on the Mac, how NDI works on that side? Because I'm Mac based, but I'm not on M1 yet.
I can say it works.
Jeff's in here.
The Sienna, I have 6 of these wonderful M1 Mac Minis, which are for sale, by the way, Omar. But those, it does work. We do have NDI working on them with the Sienna products.
Yep.
That's good to know.
I have another question that's going in a completely different direction. See how this goes. At the moment, it's very much a pro product. NDI is very much a pro product. But I'm sitting here thinking consumer-based, that people who run information around their AV at home hi-fi environment, do you see that you're going to produce a pro consumer or consumer based product ever with NDI?
Well, as NDI, we are totally open. I mean, we don't have product, you know. NDI is a technology, so everybody can use it to do their product. And we are really happy to see, you know, company using NDI outside the Pro AV market or the broadcast market. Why not? I mean, there are so many advantage in NDI, you know. If you combine all the feature like the quality, the latency, the flexibility, I mean, is absolutely a perfect solution for many different market, education, I don't know, medical, why not? Just taking account that is don't have any resolution limitation or frame rate or color space. So yeah, it can be used for many different market.
I see Andrew, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just curious. So what parts of NDI technology would somebody have to pay for? Or what is free? It seems free to use, but if you were building a product that uses NDI, is there a payment system?
Right.
How does it work?
Basically, so yeah, it's a free technology. But then we have 2 different SDK. So there's a free SDK and then there is the embedded SDK. So embedded SDK allowed developer to to use dedicated hardware like FPGA to create or to encode or decode the NDI stream. And in the embedded SDK, there are extra features that are not in the free SDK. And the embedded SDK is, you know, to use and to create product with the embedded SDK, there is a royalty agreement.
But that's the only case, not
Yep.
for software or other things.
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
There are. Yeah.
fantastic. Thank you.
Yep.
And Jeff?
I was going to say something in regards to the more simpler consumer, larger market of the consumer side. You got to remember, as large as we think our video production world is, it's not. Consumer is way larger. One of the ways that it is breaching that space is with Apple TVs. So Apple TV with the Sienna display app on it is in high use for distribution purposes. We're starting to roll it out. And like even we'll go out and do productions, I'm bringing 5 or 6 Apple TVs with me. And I'm using that on the remote side to be able to hit the network and be able to get video out to those locations. And you have a great user interface, especially when you can have it auto start in the kiosk mode. And I have heard that there are educational facilities that are rolling out the same way, and also some of corporate facilities too. It's just a very easy interface that people understand for playback purposes.
Apple TV support must really bother you, Jeff. Being such a Windows guy.
I'm always dogging on the Mac guys. I just don't use Mac in production.
Oh.
I do have an iPhone, I do have an iPad, and I know that's sacrilegious in so many ways, but I prefer PCs when it comes to production.
I was going to say, that's why you got them for sale, right?
They are now. I was very disappointed. At first, all our tests for those M1s was really good. We were using them to do this big event where we needed to have a lot of team viewers involved. And so we tested it out. We literally had 48 team viewers up on one machine. And that's 48 local remote machines. And I couldn't believe it. It was like, okay, test some more, test some more. This is going to a 4K monitor. We got 32 up on it comfortably on two 4K monitors. It's like, all right, let's go down to 16 and we'll just ride at 16. So I bought the 6 Max. We put them in, started this show. We couldn't get 6 to work that were reliable. We had to downscale every one of them into grayscale in order for them not to choke. And so that's why I was like, okay, enough of this. I'm going back to my Dells and I'll be done with it. Because I could do every bit of that on Dells, but I couldn't get the Dells fast enough. And also, they're 3 times the cost. $700 versus $2,200 was an average Dell that we were buying. So yeah, I thought it was going to be a good route, but it didn't work as well as I wanted it to.
That's the break sometimes, but getting us back on track a little bit. Lee Love, who presented maybe about a month and a half ago on photography, asking, will there eventually be a way to determine which NIC NDI is using? I want to keep Dante and NDI on separate networks. So that goes back to what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, again, the best solution today is to use Discovery Server because then, the traffic, if all the equipment will use the Discovery Server, and the Discovery Server is running in a specific network, then the traffic will be directed in this specific network. But we are working on a better solution that will be released soon.
Great. I think that makes a lot of people happy.
Yeah.
And then Justin Herminghaus, another regular on our panel. If an application, i.e. vMix, is creating multiple inputs from the same NDI source, is NDI aware enough to only send a single stream between endpoints, or does the requesting application need to be aware to not repeat multiple duplicate streams?
So this is unicast, because if you use unicast, every time you ask to the encoder to send you the output, is creating a new stream. You can then turn it in multicast, and that's it. Then is the network switch that duplicate the source.
Okay, so if you're bringing in a single NDI source into vMix and then creating multiple inputs in vMix that are referencing that source, you're saying that it's going to be multiple streams. Is that right?
I would say yes.
That's good to know. Jeff, were you going to interject there?
If vMix is getting it, I'm not sure if it actually does that or not. That would be like going into a TriCaster with one input, but I could duplicate it. But if you went to every input and subscribed back to that, then yes, that would be multiple. So if you're not doing what do they call it in vMix? Is it the virtual? They call it virtual inputs, didn't they?
Right. Yep.
So I don't think that would do it. Or if you created, quote, their mix effect thing with it, I don't believe that would necessarily do it, but that is definitely something you can easily watch your network traffic.
Yeah.
And you can see if it's happening. That's without a doubt. But I think a big miscommunication that a lot of people don't get, and you would probably okay this too, Roberto, is whenever NDI is advertising, it's not using bandwidth. So if you're showing, if you see all these sources, those aren't using bandwidth. Only the ones that you subscribe to and that you're watching, those are the ones using bandwidth.
Of course.
And a lot of people do not understand that. So just because your Dante NIC and your NDI NIC are both seeing the same traffic, as long as you don't have a device on your Dante network looking at the NDI traffic side and actually pulling something off the NDI side, then it doesn't matter. It's just seeing the sources. It's not actually pulling the sources.
That's a great point, Jeff. Thank you for interjecting that. That's valuable information to know. And then and maybe I don't know, maybe somebody on the panel might know, but so if does vMix do something similar with proxies like the TriCaster does? You know, if you have a bunch of NDI sources and their little thumbnails in your input, are they pulling that bandwidth, or do they not pull it until you go, you know, take them to program or anything? Just nodding his head. I don't know that the Facebook audience can see that, but he's nodding his head. No, no
That is a
proxies.
big no. No, that's secret sauce only on the NewTek side. That's doing the proxy flipping and things like that. So buy a TriCaster.
Yeah, I think vMix pulls them full fat because, you know, if you can overload vMix if you put too many sources into it on things.
Great.
Yeah.
And by sorry, by overload it, you mean you overloading the whatever NIC you have feeding
Right.
the vMix machine.
Yeah.
And I think you know, if you're going to put it in and you're going to put it into 4 or 5, so you're going to bring it in and you're going to have it in on 4 or 5. I think literally they're all loaded, as far as I'm aware. I'm not sure about. I have a feeling Wirecast may not do it, but that may be a different thing. I think Wirecast is a bit lighter on it.
I don't know. I never use Wirecast, so I cannot answer this.
Great. So, Roberto, are there any exciting products that you're aware of or might be coming to the market soon that are implementing NDI natively, or that have an NDI plugin? I mean, I know like things like VLC has NDI as an NDI plugin, and there's, you know, NDI plugins for OBS and whatnot. But is there anything that's exciting, either hardware or software, that's using NDI that we should be aware of, or that our audience should be aware of?
Oh, well, we are talking with a lot of manufacturers, and a lot of manufacturers are interested to support NDI, both hardware or software. So it's not easy to answer. I mean, there will be a lot of new products supporting NDI, but for me, it's very difficult to disclose this, you know.
I'm going to ask the question that Ed's asking. Are we going to have NDI support in Blackmagic?
I don't know. I mean, probably would be a great move from Blackmagic doing that.
That's a great answer to that question. I thought, Leo, you were going to ask if we were going to get NDI in Zoom, since, you know, we haven't gotten an answer from Zoom if we were going to attack the other way.
I think that one, I've heard that one, a rumor of that one as well.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll see. You know, pretty soon we'll have someone from Zoom joining us on AV Tech Talks. So maybe we'll come back in a couple of weeks and you'll get the chance to ask that question again. Omar, are we seeing any more questions on the YouTube side or anything? It looks like I'm out of questions here in Zoom.
I am not seeing anything on the YouTube side at the moment. There's a couple of chit chat back and forth here, but not exactly related to NDI topic, just more of a general conversation between Tom and myself. I will double check Facebook here.
We solved NDI. Everybody knows everything there is to know. Everyone is experts now. Maybe anybody here on the panel who isn't, you know, as up on NDI. I know Iris, like, I don't know how much you're using it in your day to day, but do you have any thoughts about any of the stuff you've heard tonight?
I'm not using it in my day to day. I'm trying to figure out if I can do what I want to do with it, though. I'm looking at the possibility of, since streaming's here to stay, so I'm looking at the possibility of trying to just introduce something like this to like high school students who want to get in the industry. So I'm trying to figure out the minimum required, because I'm not sure the school's network can handle it. So I'm trying to figure out how I can, but the minimum I can do with it is to try and, you know, introduce people to this.
Jeff, you got your hand up?
Simple. go to the App Store, download the NDI HX camera app from NewTek. Or there's one from Sienna also from the iPhone side or that iOS side. And there's also a app on the Android side for the NDI camera 2. And then just put that on the network and bring it into your switcher flavor of choice that can handle NDI inputs and get started. They have the camera in their phone and they have everything they need right there in the palm of their hand. Just go ahead and do it. Now, granted, you will need the network infrastructure to handle it, but it's NDI HX, so it's pretty light on the bandwidth requirements. Sometimes, though, there are some requirements in the Wi-Fi infrastructure in schools, especially, that may or may not allow certain things. But it's worth a shot. It's it's not a free app anymore. I don't believe. Maybe it is. It was free for a while. I think it's $25, so it's practically free.
That's where I'm trying to figure out where the problem is, if I can even do it with this network. So.
Yeah, I mean, the hardest thing would be, and maybe Roberto can talk a little about some of the things that might trip you up as far as firewalls or things like that for getting NDI on really locked down networks, such as like in schools and other higher education institutions.
Yeah, NDI use some specific port for discovery and for transmission. So it's quite easy to use a firewall to block NDI or unblock NDI. So everything is documented, you know, that's it, you know, pure networking.
And to Jeff's point earlier, Iris, I think not even a switcher, even just NDI Studio Manager, or Studio Monitor, sorry, you'd be able to see an NDI source on another computer and just show that you're beaming it. The only thing is then the kids, once they figure that out, will start beaming their friends across the, the room and not even need to like use a messaging app or anything. They'll just start NDIing, their phones to each other.
Well, considering some of them FaceTime each other during class time, how can this be any worse? At least it would be related and relevant.
But when they then rename themselves, their phone as whiteboard, and then the teacher goes and presses it and it appears, then that's going to be an interesting environment.
Yeah, for sure. I actually, Iris, I thought you were going to ask more about your other work where in like the hotel industry, for events, because NDI seems like a great solution for overflow rooms to me, where the audience isn't seeing what's already happening in the room, because you are going to have latency. But if you have an overflow room down the hall,
which beats running all those cables, yes.
Absolutely. I even could see this for, I've done work with webcasting companies back in the in-person days where they were running, cat cable all over the hotel to be able to take their video feeds. And now they can, if they can, well, it's probably a little expensive to tap into the hotel infrastructure, but if they can get that to pass, then they can take their video that way instead.
Well, like our hotel, if you have the one building and then we have an expansion and they're two different networks. So you couldn't do an overflow from one section to the other, even though people wanted it to, without running those cables all the way down the hall. So doing a wireless solution or a cloud solution might actually solve a few of those issues.
Well, as Roberto mentioned earlier, using NDI Access Manager, is that right?
Right, yeah.
Yes. Then you could bridge subnets. So as long as there's something connecting the two networks, a common router, then you should be able to send one to the other. So just a little bit, your IT department would have to get involved, but that's definitely now something that is doable. So you can look like the hero at the next time they need to do that and say, oh, why don't we just use NDI like it's a casual thing, and then let the IT guy figure out what you're talking about.
If we're sort of our own IT, so.
We are many examples in the market of customer using this solution to transmit video. For example, a good example here in Italy is Radio Mediaset. Radio Mediaset, they have a studio in Rome and their main facility is in Milan. is around 500 kilometers. And they use NDI over a dedicated fiber between Milan and Rome, are two different networks, and they receive the camera, and they are able to control the camera from Rome to Milan. And but we have many different customers doing that, you know.
So,
Yeah,
Roberto, I wanted to jump in real quick. I'm sorry, Ed. I wanted to jump in real quick. We got about 20 minutes left on the clock, everybody. If you got any more questions you want to ask, now's the time to ask them, because we're getting ready to wind down. I wanted to ask you, I feel like we've been bombarding you with questions and kind of like asking. Can you tell me what one of your favorite NDI products are and why this is one of your favorites that was developed by NDI?
So where I'm really happy to, I'm really happy to use, and I really like Viz Vector, is something similar to a TriCaster, but it's branded Vizrt, because it's software based only. And the combination between software only application and NDI is just unbelievable, because at the end it allows a very flexible workflow. For example, I was discussing last week with a customer that was doing live production for sport, and so he was running Vector in a small hobby van, and then he wanted to have an extra output for YouTube. But the output was different. I mean, the main output for the TV broadcast was, they had to avoid to show some brand. But on the YouTube program out, they wanted to have some brand, in the show. And so they was able to run two different vector in two different machines, sharing the same source, but creating two different output. And this is quite unique. The combination between software only and NDI is something amazing, because you can create a sort of unlimited workflow. This is quite unique. And this will come soon, even with audio, and we are working to make NDI running over internet. So this will open really a crazy opportunity for all the NDI users.
And what do you say? What are some of the challenges that NDI's face, with coming up with some of these products, like the KVM functionality? That's been an amazing product for myself. The web presenter, the screen captures. And I know the names have changed a little bit here and there, but what are some of the challenges that NDI has overcame that kind of set the standard? Like a lot of things we talk about is how SMPTE's 2110 has really changed the way we're doing things, and you guys are definitely like sort of its backbone at this point. What are some things that NDI is doing in the future, like you're saying, with getting onto the internet? There's some of the challenges you guys are facing that you're solving, essentially not just for NDI, but also for the entire community as a whole.
Well, look, if you use NDI for live production, it's something completely different compared to the old SDI based production. Is really, video over IP is already completely different. What we are doing is just, looking at the market and the customer need and trying to fix their problem, adding tool or capability in NDI. That's it. This is where we are focused on. And then we are focused on identifying different markets where NDI can be successful and can help the customer. For example, NDI is the perfect way to distribute video over network. That's it, So even the AV market is a market where NDI for sure will be really successful, because if you are, I don't know, in an airport, you need to send video over thousands of monitors. NDI is just perfect. You know, if you use NDI HX, you even don't need a network infrastructure because you can use Wi-Fi. So NDI is becoming a very strong standard with a combination of amazing capability. That's it. I cannot hear you. You're still
Omar,
mute.
you're muted
Yep.
there.
Sorry. I was just a lot of these very intelligent masterminds like Jeff Keesley here with the nice who's been diving in, deeply with the Siena and NDI, and other guys who have been diving in with VizVector and what they're doing. NDI is definitely taking this year by storm, you could say, right? And you guys have definitely developed a product that is being used throughout the industry. And Jeff hit on the nail, like, yeah, we're a small niche, but we're using it for everything. And it's become a point where I have started myself on shows, gone back to doing things the old way with hardline SDI, right? As you said, old,
Right.
and XLRs. And something came up and it was like, we had to add an extra input or something like that, but we didn't have it. So I immediately was like, well, we're on the network, so let's just do NDI. We downloaded NDI, and because we were on the network, we were able to send a feed back somewhere else because we were on NDI already. And it wasn't for that solution, that would never happen. It wouldn't have happened, right? So NDI is becoming kind of ingrained into what we're doing in the industry. Do you or anybody else in the panelists here, have you guys used NDI in a way that was like, hey, because this product is here and I know how to use it, it's been a lifesaver on my show? And I open that to the community.
I can't answer it that I've answered it with NDI, but I feel this is like when when everything moved over to TCP/IP. Before, we were using different protocols on the network, and you were doing various different things. Some of you won't remember all of this, but it was everything on the network was different protocols, and then suddenly it flipped to TCP/IP and got rid of the whole raft. And it was like everything suddenly worked together, and it just stopped you having to spend hours and hours trying to configure things.
Let me add something because this is quite interesting. So there are two different aspects. That one is audio. If you remember how it was with analog audio and how you manage audio today with audio over IP. I mean, is a dream. You remember years ago, if you wanted to have, let me tell you something extreme. So I wanted to play some music with an audio mixer, but then I was struggling with, the connector, different connector impedance, level, all this kind of stuff. Every time was a nightmare, soldering stuff, adding resistor, trying to have a good signal. Today, with audio over IP, for example, with Dante, you just install Dante Virtual Sound Card in your computer, and you play Spotify, and you receive the Dante stream into an audio mixer. That's it. It's almost impossible to think how we was doing live production 10 years ago, And then if you think about the video, this is another revolution. Because look, I want to do a production with 5 camera. Just 5 years ago, every camera was a single connection to a mixer. For example, from my hobby van to the volleyball arena, I had 1 cable per camera. Today, I have an optical fiber, and that is running, from the hobby van to inside the arena. There, I have a network switch, and then I connect the camera. Is only 1 cable. This is a small aspect that is creating a big change, in all the production. Because the setup time is probably 5 times less. And the efficiency is much more. If I need to add something, I just add something in the switch. I don't need to plug another cable from the Obi-Wan to the place. Those small aspects are completely changing the game of the production, the video distribution. And again, it's not only live production, it's really about video distribution.
So I guess we're talking about live production, and the latency involved with NDI. I mean, Jeff, I know you're using it in kind of hybrid productions. Are you using it for live, and are you finding that it's the latency is low enough to use for iMag or something like that?
Well, iMag has always got an extra set of challenges with it. Projector latency, LED processor for LED walls, latency in that. So there's other things in the path usually that are adding things, and because you have something that adds maybe 1 or 2 more frames, well then of course it gets the blind because it's the last thing in. But for us in our applications, we're frequently at 1 frame of latency, and you can't see that. So yeah, we know it's there only because it's added on top of everything else. But definitely 1 frame of latency is well within reason to be able to use in an iMac situation. It just depends on everything else that's down the chain, processors, additional processors, and such like that. But I have absolutely used it, and there's some tricks you can do too. If you have an NDI router at your disposal, such as I do, I will sometimes just route things directly to the LED wall or the projectors, and so then I'm bypassing some other things that may be in the way. But it just depends on your application or what you're using it for. But it can definitely be used. It depends on the size of the room also. If you're in a big arena, that's one thing. But if you're in a small boardroom or a hotel back room somewhere that's just 40 by 50 feet, you're gonna be more cautious to see that latency come into play. That's for sure.
Hey, Jevin, just to add what you're saying here, we got a question, one last question here for the night before we wrap it up. But Curtis on Facebook had asked, and Roberto, this one's for you. Any idea of any improving lower latency for full NDI maybe coming down the pipe? Was his question. This would be the last one of the night.
I mean, NDI encoding is very fast. The pure encoding from SDI to NDI is less than a frame. Then there are aspects related to networking or processing. For sure, computer speed will help, but we cannot do impossible thing. So it's very difficult to answer this question today because we don't know what will be the evolution for hardware, for networking. For sure, the limit is the light speed. We cannot be faster.
That's true. There are physical limitations, light speed. Yeah.
If only our clients understood that.
Yeah. I mean, now we just need teleportation. Just teleport,
Right.
just teleport video into people's brains directly. That'd be great. Wonderful. So, I mean, this has been a great conversation. I don't think I've seen as deep and in-depth talk about NDI in all the webinars and things that I am constantly searching and looking through. So, Roberto, thank you so much for
Thank you
for all
and
that.
I survive. It's 3 a.m. here.
Well, we appreciate and it's amazing you're staying so sharp so late into the evening or early into the morning. So thank you so much for that.
Well, because the discussion was very interesting, so this is why.
Absolutely. So with that, I think we'll start our wrap up for the evening. Again, I always love to kind of just ask the panel for any closing thoughts before me and Omar kind of wrap it up. Leo, I know you had a bunch of great questions.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think we're just seeing the beginning of where NDI is going to take us. Because once you start thinking about what you can plug in and the ability, and okay, we can also talk about using it for wireless and having your phones connected and that sort of stuff. But when you think about being able to just say, this connects, this connects, this connects, I don't really have to care about what the make of the hardware is. I don't care. I just want it connecting in and moving away from, as you said, potentially SDI cables and HDMI cables and a raft of other things, and just making it simple, super simple. That's going to be really interesting.
Absolutely. No, thank you. Marty, you had some comments earlier tonight too. I'd love to get your final thoughts.
Yeah, I'm very impressed with what I hear, and I'm using NDI. It's just like a magic technology that just makes things work. And I totally agree with your assertion that all of our interconnects used to be proprietary. Every manufacturer had their own protocol. Even in audio networking, it was like there were half a dozen different protocols out there for audio networking, and now it's all converging. Everybody got on the same bandwagon. So it has to be interplayable. We have to be able to play together to survive, and that's really cool. And I've heard people surmise that NDI may fade away, as an interim solution once 2110, comes further developed, and now I'm not so inclined to agree with that.
Me neither.
Yeah, I think some of the the infrastructure is exactly what we brought up, that you can drop NDI on existing networks where the SMPTE 2110 is going to have to be built out, pretty heftily, with a lot of over engineering, because of course it will grow, and it's not as easy as running to Best Buy and picking up another switch or more adapters for Ethernet. I would ask Jeff Keithley what he has to say, but we don't have that much time. But no, Jeff, if you have any final words, love to hear them.
You're so kind, Ed. Roberto, thank you so much for coming aboard, and thank you for knocking down all those espressos before you started off. It was fantastic having you aboard and hearing your thoughts, because I know you've got a lot of them. We've had great conversations one-on-one, and it was really great to have you here to share with the class.
I'm very, very pleased.
So with that, we'll wrap it up. So Omar, can you give us just a quick overview of what you have coming up on the podcast this week? No, you're on mute. I'll unmute you. There you go.
I got multiple places going on here. Sorry. So the podcast this Wednesday is interesting. We're trying to lock it down. Unfortunately, we're getting some back and forth between the speaker. But if you guys have been following our article series that we just released, we're bringing one of the speakers that developed a new app. He's confirming dates with us. So hopefully that happens this Wednesday. If not, it'll be a open forum discussion, and we'll talk about whatever you guys want to talk about that night. So hopefully we lock it down. But if it does, I don't want to give it away because if he doesn't show up, I don't want to make anybody feel guilty or make him look bad if he doesn't show up. But if it does happen, it'll be really cool. I promise you'll like to talk. If it doesn't happen, we'll have an open forum. You guys talk to me and Austin about whatever you like. That's what's happening this Wednesday going on. But also, I love Roberto, if I give you some positive feedback for the community today. So Victor had said earlier today, NDI is here to stay, that's for sure. I love it, makes productions engineering a lot simpler, simplifying the workflow. Leela, thanks for your time, great information. Andrew Brown said, it's amazing how AV has become almost equivalent to the IT network infrastructure. Again, awesome information. I learned a lot. Thank you so much for Roberto. And of course, the AV Educate team. As a guest, got to run, talk soon. From Iris, she said, so much good information. I'm working my way through all of it. And Chris had just given a little story. His positive feedback was NDI saved me on a broadcast live show over Zoom. It allowed me to bounce programs over a network to another backup Zoom machine to take over as host while I had to do an emergency restart on the main machine. This then just hand off back to the main. A true show saver was positive feedback. And then for myself, obviously, big fan of NDI myself. It's been a huge saver for me as well on numerous shows. So thank you, Roberto, for being here with us tonight. Thank you for staying up with us late and for giving us your feedback and being just so open and honest with us about everything going on with NDI and what's to come.
Cool. Thanks to you.
That's great. Yeah, I'm a big user of NDI. I do a lot of pre-record stuff, and I always use it to bring teleprompter, excuse me, into Zoom. I capture the teleprompter from one machine, bring it into Zoom, and I'm able to just make that my camera, and boom, there I've got my teleprompter. I can let the other user pin it, and then that frees up, other machines to do other things. We're using it here for the show. So, NDI is definitely a super useful tool that's found its way into so many production workflows. Omar, quickly too, before we go next week, I know we had a little bit of back and forth also with next week's presenter. Did we lock something down, or is that still up in the air a little bit too?
Who's next week again?
It was going to be some camera tracking.
Oh, got it. So yeah, that one's up in the air.
Okay. So we'll have something for you next week, because we're here every Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, US, 7 to 9 on Zoom webinar, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live. So keep tuning in. We'll be here every week. And no matter where you watch, you get to see us in 1080p, thanks to the support of the DVE store, dvestore.com. So, they've helped us get access to our beautiful 1080p webinar account. So if you're watching on the webinar, it's 1080p, and then we stream it out to Facebook at 1080p as well as YouTube. So no matter where you watch, you get to see you don't miss anything. Back when we weren't doing 1080p, some of those demos were tough to watch because you couldn't see everything people were doing on their screens. Now we don't have that problem. So when we get into some more of the heavier demos, you'll be able to see it. So make sure you tune in on Monday nights, 7 or 9, see the beautiful 1080p, and visit dvestore.com. Let them know that you heard about them from AV Tech Talks, and thank them for blessing us with this great resolution. It's the gift that keeps on giving. We love it. So with that, I want to have our panel say goodnight to the audiences on Facebook and on YouTube, and make sure everybody gets to see all of our panelists. And we'll see you guys next week, 7 p.m. And have a good night.